Geoff Barton is the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders. We had a chat a bit earlier on, and I asked him, why is this happening?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is there is a crisis in teacher recruitment generally. So before we get onto the male-female issue, frankly, we are struggling to be able to get enough teachers into our schools and colleges. 1 in 8 maths lessons are taught by people who haven't got a qualification in maths. So there's the first bit. This is part of a bigger picture. But then when you get to primary, we're finding that in some parts of England, there are a third of primary schools who haven't got any male teacher at all. Now, there'll be some parents listening to this thinking, well, why does that matter? It probably matters for a couple of reasons. One is we want our schools to reflect our society in all of their diversity, and therefore to see that actually males are choosing to be working with young people, working in that kind of environment, being role models is really important. That's always been the case. It's more important. And it's more important for the second reason. And that is that males in particular, young males, are getting a lot of pretty bad role modeling about what it is like to be a male. And therefore, if the first time you're really encountering in authority in your school is in secondary, a male teacher, it means that you're not being brought up with the sense that actually someone who is of your same sex might have chosen to work in a kind of school and can be a great role model to you. We're depriving youngsters of that opportunity to see what males might do. Some people would say it's because we want to see science teaching in the future. I don't buy that. I don't think that science teaching is about males and other kinds of teaching is about females. I think it is about seeing the wide diversity of our society mirrored in our schools, including around sex and gender.
And the other thing is whether teachers sign up for this or not. Sometimes your teachers can be people that you may confide in, right? Sometimes they can become that kind of not quite your parent figure, not quite your mate figure, but someone that you feel is a person of authority, that's a safe individual that you can share things with as a pupil. And in terms of relatability, maybe as a female, you might feel more comfortable talking to a female teacher. As a male, you might feel more comfortable talking to a male teacher. I appreciate the opposite could be the case, but if you don't have those types of role models, or even that person of authority that's not your parent that you feel like you perhaps need to talk to about something, if you don't have that, I guess from that perspective, more pastorally, if that's a word, that could be a factor to consider as well as an issue. What do you reckon, Geoff?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the great things about choosing to become a teacher compared to, say, becoming an accountant or becoming a management consultant is you've got the opportunity to shape the lives of young people. And that's partly through what you teach and how you teach, but it's partly, as you say, through the interactions you have with those people. And I think what we probably want, particularly against a backdrop when there's so much controversy around the way males are presented in this ultra macho kind of way, is you want young men to realise that actually compassion, empathy, humour is something that we as men do, just like you as women do. And that the world doesn't just fall into these kind of binary stereotypes. And the more we've got youngsters who can talk to their teacher, whether it's a male teacher or a female teacher, the better. But that's not going to happen if we can't get males to choose to go and work in primary schools. And I think the reason we're not seeing that at the moment is partly to do with pay. If you work in a primary school and you work your way up and you become a primary head, you will never earn the same as you would do by becoming a secondary head. And so what we are probably seeing is that more male teachers choosing to go into secondary because they will be able to be paid more in the future. And even at the starting point, as a new teacher, pay is going to be an issue, because if you want to have the other things that other jobs, management consultancy, accountancy give you, flexibility and working from home, teaching won't give you that. So the report that's come out today around the absence of male teachers said that one answer has to be we have to pay all teachers more. So we're attracting males in particular to think, I want to go and have that moral mission of helping to prepare the next generation.
So what other factors are contributing to this? Is it just pay?
I think pay is part of it. I think status is probably part of it. So teaching is not high status in terms of people choosing it as a career, and that's partly around pay, but it's also around pressures of work. People who haven't worked in education will listen to that and think, that's ridiculous. Think of how many holidays you get. And you do. You get great summer holidays in particular. If you've got a family, it's one of the joys is you can have your time with your family on holiday. But during the working week, it's very different, because if you're teaching 5 lessons with 30 children in every one of those classes, you're preparing for those children, you're marking after that. That extends your school day from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. So there is a workload issue which the government is helping to try to address. So I think that's part of it. Status, workload, pay, and a sense that in some areas, particularly the most challenging areas, it becomes highly risky to go and work in those schools because you know that an Ofsted inspection that goes wrong, bad performance tables going wrong, those can lead to that school being taken over, the head teacher losing their job, all of those kind of things. So it's becoming particularly difficult to attract all teachers, but particularly male teachers, to primary schools in the most disadvantaged areas.
As a former English teacher yourself, Geoff, if you were to go back to graduating yourself, looking at the world as it is today, especially with that factor of cost, what do you think is needed to encourage more men into primary education? I wonder whether you would have taken the plunge and decided to be a teacher now, looking at where we're at the moment. Would you have?
Well, I've got the benefits of hindsight. So what I know is, and what I see is, that actually over those 32 years, I still, just occasionally, either get a message from a student of mine in the past, or I see a student of mine. So there's a student of mine who's working on a national newspaper, who was the person who broke the major story about Boris Johnson breaking the rules, partying, before the night of Prince Philip's funeral. That was someone who I taught English to. He was a member of my debating society. I remember teaching him Macbeth and all of those things. And then there are others who I bump into when I go to restaurants. There's others who, frankly, when I'm just walking around, come and say, Mr. Barton, I know I was naughty in your classes, but it's great to see you, kind of stuff. There is a kind of satisfaction that I'm not sure we always communicate about teaching. And it is the most deeply personal stuff. And you'll be talking all the time, like you'll hear other people talking about artificial intelligence and stuff. The one thing that will not be replaced is the humanity of the older generation teaching the younger generation. And would I go back into being a teacher again? Yes, I would. It's fraught with problems. Technology ought to help us to make it a better profession. But my goodness, at its best, it is an extraordinary and uplifting profession.
So what do we need to do then, Geoff? What needs to happen?
So I think the pay issue is a significant one, and the independent schools review body has recommended there needs to be a 6.5% pay increase. That would cost the government £500 million. They should get on and do that, because otherwise we're going to have a wave of industrial action in the autumn term, which will do nobody any good. So that's number one. Secondly, we need to have a look at workload, what generates the amount of work which is putting teachers off. A third of teachers leave after 5 years. And thirdly, we need to look at what we call accountability. So in other words, how we measure schools. And we know from the tragic case of Ruth Perry, which gave the most extreme example of what happened to a primary head because of the pressure that inspection put on her, that there is a level of general pressure that if you are a head teacher, particularly in a primary school, seeing your name on the front of the local newspaper because your school is deemed not to be good enough, it really undermines all of your self-confidence. No one is saying that we shouldn't measure our schools. Of course we should measure our schools, but that has got out of kilter and we need to do something. And what that would then do, the combination of pay, combination of workload, combination of looking at accountability, would allow us to recruit teachers, male and female, to the schools that need them most, in the areas that need them most. And that would start to pave the way for creating teaching as a 21st century profession, as it should be.
Geoff Barton there, the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders.